Bryan Kohberger was supposed to disappear behind bars forever, but when he arrived at Blackrock Penitentiary, something inside the prison awakened. Warden Edward Malrick had seen strange things over his decades in command, but nothing like the symbols Kohberger carved into his walls. Or the night the cameras caught him floating down a sealed hallway, followed by a shapeless shadow. In a place built to hold the worst of humanity, something darker was waiting, and Kohberger may have opened the door. Blackrock Penitentiary stood like a fortress carved into the side of a cold, jagged mountain. Surrounded by snow-covered pine trees and distant howling winds, the prison was more than isolated, it was forgotten. The only way in or out was a single road that snaked through 30 miles of wilderness, often blocked by landslides or ice. Blackrock wasn't built for rehabilitation. It was built to bury people alive, men too dangerous, too high profile, or too unstable for even the toughest maximum security prisons. Over the years, it became a dumping ground for those the system wanted hidden, and soon even whispers of the place faded from the public. When Bryan Kohberger received his life sentence without parole, the world waited to see which facility would house him. Experts speculated he'd be sent to a modern supermax like ADX Florence, but instead, without warning, his name appeared on a classified transfer list to Blackrock. The news didn't make headlines. His transfer happened under tight federal control, far from the public eye. On the third week of January, a helicopter landed just before dawn on Blackrock's helipad. Guards in black tactical gear unloaded a man in shackles and a heavy face mask. Inmates watching from the yard saw nothing but a shape hunched beneath a wool blanket. No one was told his name, but word spread fast. Everyone knew who he was. The silence that followed his arrival was louder than any shout. Kohberger was placed in cell C-201, part of an isolated unit called the Ridge. It was located on the second highest floor, closest to the old watchtower. His cell had reinforced concrete walls, no windows, and a single surveillance camera bolted into the corner. Everything about his confinement was controlled. No contact with other inmates, no movement without armed escort, and no access to any communal areas. His meals were delivered through a slot in the door by a guard who never spoke. On paper, the prison said it was for his protection. But inmates believed it was something else, something darker. Despite the extreme conditions, Blackrock had no official record of violence or escape in years. The administration claimed it was the safest high-risk facility in the country. But deep inside, prisoners talked about cold spots in the hallways, of hearing footsteps when no one was there, of inmates who simply vanished without explanation. Every few years, a new face would arrive, and within weeks they would change, grow silent, paranoid, lost in thought as if something was watching from the shadows. Some said the prison itself was alive, that it fed on fear. No one said this out loud during the day. But at night, when the lights dimmed and the halls echoed with strange creaks, the air around the cells grew heavier. Bryan Kohberger had no idea what awaited him behind those concrete walls. To the outside world, his sentence meant a lifetime in a cell. But inside Blackrock, time didn't move normally. Days blurred, nights stretched, and something beneath the surface had begun to stir. Warden Edward Malrick had been in charge of Blackrock Penitentiary for nearly 20 years, yet no one truly understood how he maintained such unwavering control. He wasn't loud or aggressive. He didn't carry a weapon. But every guard, every prisoner, and every staff member followed his orders without hesitation. Some believed it was his military past that shaped him. Decades in covert operations, missions that were never officially documented. Others thought it was something even deeper, something unspoken. He had a way of looking at people that made them feel like their thoughts were being read in real time. At Blackrock, Malrick didn't just oversee the prison, he watched everything. The security system inside Blackrock was unlike any other in the country. Thousands of hidden cameras were tucked into corners, behind light fixtures, and inside ventilation shafts. Every corridor, every cell, every inch of the prison was under constant surveillance. But Malrick didn't just rely on footage. He personally monitored movement logs, heat signatures, biometric data, and obscure reports most didn't even know existed. Inmates often joked that he saw more than God did inside those walls. It wasn't far from the truth. When Kohberger arrived, Malrick made no announcement, no welcome, no briefing. But within hours, a red folder appeared on his desk, one that outlined Kohberger's background, mental evaluations, academic history, and the full transcript of his trial. Alongside it was something else, a handwritten note from an unknown source that simply read, "Observe carefully." That was all it took. Malrick instructed that Kohberger be placed under a unique monitoring protocol. Not only was he under 24-hour camera surveillance, but infrared motion detectors were installed in his ceiling and audio pickups embedded in his mattress frame. No other inmate had this level of scrutiny. In the first week, Kohberger behaved like most new arrivals. He adjusted to the silence, the routine, the isolation. He exercised alone, ate in silence, slept for long hours. But Malrick knew how to spot patterns, and even more importantly, when those patterns shifted. On the 10th night, Kohberger stopped sleeping. He sat upright on his cot for 6 hours straight, staring at the camera without blinking. When his meal tray arrived the next morning, he hadn't touched it. On day 12, he moved all his furniture to the corner of the cell, leaving the center completely empty. On day 15, he began scratching shapes into the cement floor with a metal pin clipped from his blanket seam. Malrick watched all of it. He took notes, tracked the symbols, even matched them to old incident reports from decades earlier. The symbols weren't random. They had appeared before, carved into walls by inmates who later disappeared under unexplained circumstances. Malrick didn't alert his staff. He didn't alter Kohberger's routine. Instead, he waited. It wasn't the first time he had seen this pattern emerge, and every time it did, something followed. Something not recorded in official reports. Something that didn't leave a trace, but always left a void. To the outside world, Bryan Kohberger was simply serving his time. But inside Blackrock, he had triggered something the Warden had been waiting for. Something that had awakened before. And once awakened, it never went back to sleep. 3 weeks into Bryan Kohberger's time at Blackrock, the prison experienced its first true anomaly in years. At exactly 2:17 a.m., the entire facility was plunged into complete darkness. Every light shut off simultaneously. Backup generators failed. Alarms froze mid-blare. Even the emergency power lines designed to function during nuclear fallout refused to respond. For the first time in its long and mysterious history, Blackrock was silent. Within seconds, guards scrambled to secure key locations. Steel doors locked automatically, and inmates were ordered to remain still over loudspeakers that no longer transmitted sound. In the pitch black, some began pounding on their cell doors, calling for help, demanding explanations. But their voices were swallowed by the silence. In the ridge, Kohberger's isolated block, the silence felt heavier. The kind that pressed down on your chest and whispered in your ear. Even the most hardened inmates sat frozen, unsure if what they were feeling was real or something much worse. When the lights returned 3 hours later, everything appeared normal, except for cell B7. Inside, Marcus Dole, a former cartel enforcer, was gone. His bed was neatly made, his uniform folded at the foot, but Dole himself had vanished. His cell door remained locked. No signs of forced exit, no tools, no tampering, not even a footprint on the floor. His disappearance was impossible. Cameras had stopped recording during the blackout, and the backup servers stored no data from that time. What disturbed the staff most wasn't Dole's disappearance. It was what he left behind. Beneath his bed, scratched into the concrete in deep, frantic lines, were the words, "He walks at night." The message repeated 5 times, growing sloppier with each line. Along the far wall, nearly invisible unless lit from a certain angle, were handprints, not fingerprints, but large, distorted impressions, like something had leaned against the wall with enormous weight. The administration immediately ordered an investigation, but as with every unexplained event in Blackrock, the results were buried in paperwork, dismissed as prisoner manipulation. Dole was officially declared an escapee, but no one believed that. The cell was sealed, and rumors spread quickly. Inmates said the blackout wasn't a failure, it was a signal. That when the power died, something ancient moved through the halls, something no bars or cameras could contain. Bryan Kohberger had remained silent through it all. But guards noticed a change. His face grew pale, his behavior more erratic. He stared at the far corner of his cell as though something stood there just beyond reach. He scratched symbols into the walls with his fingernails when the guards weren't looking. One officer claimed he found Kohberger whispering toward the ceiling late at night, repeating the same 3 words over and over. He chose me. Despite this, Kohberger's mental evaluations continued to report him as stable. No medications were prescribed, no transfers approved. But behind closed doors, Warden Malrick had already begun reviewing older case files, ones that mentioned similar blackouts, missing inmates, and symbols carved into cold stone. The last report like it was dated 11 years ago, and that inmate too had vanished during a storm. Blackrock had gone dark before, and every time it did, someone never came back. Weeks after Marcus Dole's disappearance, the atmosphere inside Blackrock Penitentiary shifted. The guards tightened their movements, eyes darting more often toward corners. Inmates grew quiet, even the loudest among them speaking in hushed tones, as if the prison itself might be listening. Kohberger remained in his cell, expression unreadable, his eyes now constantly scanning the walls as though he expected them to move. The change in him wasn't just mental, it was physical. He lost weight rapidly, his skin growing pale and marked with bruises no one could explain. He wasn't sleeping, he wasn't eating, he wasn't speaking. Then came the assignment. Under Warden Malrick's orders, Kohberger was quietly placed on restricted work duty, something never done for high-risk inmates in isolation. The task was simple on paper. Assist with clearing out the East Wing Library, long abandoned after a structural collapse years earlier. Most believed it was just storage now, filled with moldy books and forgotten files. But Malrick had sent Kohberger there for a reason. He believed patterns repeated for a purpose. The last 2 inmates who had cleaned that section both disappeared within months. The library was cold, even colder than the rest of the prison. Dust hung in the air like a curtain, and the broken windows let in thin rays of gray light that barely touched the floor. Kohberger was given gloves, a mask, and a flashlight. A guard locked the metal door behind him, then waited outside without a word. Alone in the decaying silence, Kohberger wandered past collapsed shelves and shattered glass. Most of the books were illegible, their pages stuck together from moisture and time. But something drew him toward the far end, an old wooden shelf tipped at an angle, almost flush with the wall. Beneath it, half buried in debris, was a leather-bound book with no title. He pulled it free. The cover was cracked, the binding brittle, but the pages inside were untouched by age. The contents were nothing like a novel or prison record. They were hand-drawn schematics of the prison S underground layout, maps of tunnels that didn't appear in official blueprints. Symbols filled the margins, the same ones Kohberger had unknowingly carved into his walls. The last section of the book listed names, dozens of them, each accompanied by a date and a time. Most names matched former inmates, men declared dead, missing, or transferred quietly under mysterious circumstances. The final page had only one name, Bryan Kohberger. No date, no time, just a space left blank. From that moment, something inside him broke. That night, Kohberger didn't return to his normal routine. He paced his cell for hours, mumbling to himself. He began drawing full floor plans of the prison on his walls, using crushed charcoal from burned toast. When guards checked on him, he stared through them like he didn't recognize their faces. 3 days later, a fire broke out in the East Wing library. It happened just after midnight. No camera recorded how it started. No alarms went off. The room was reduced to blackened stone, but when investigators searched for the book, it was gone. Nothing remained but ash, and one thing more. Scratched into the floor where the shelf had been was a new phrase, jagged and deep. "The door is open." The fire in the East Wing marked a turning point in Blackrock's already sinister history. Officially, the cause was listed as faulty wiring, an explanation no one believed. The East Wing hadn't been connected to power in over a decade. Unofficially, Warden Malrick reviewed the surveillance logs from the surrounding halls, scanning for anything unusual before the flames erupted. At precisely 12:06 a.m., all cameras on the second floor glitched at once. Static filled the screens. When the footage resumed 3 minutes later, Kohberger's cell appeared empty, though his door had never opened and no alarms had been triggered. The next morning, a corrections officer failed to report for his shift. Officer Blake Keller, a 10-year veteran of Blackrock, had worked the night of the fire. He was last seen entering the ridge block to check on Kohberger's cell. His radio was later found lying near the old elevator shaft, still transmitting static. His body was never recovered. His name was quietly added to a growing list of personnel, lost in the line of duty. Behind closed doors, prison officials began to panic. Staff turnover doubled in the following weeks. Some guards requested transfers. Others simply never returned to work. Inside the ridge, Kohberger returned to his cell as if nothing had happened. The cameras showed him lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. His hands rested on his chest, unmoving for hours. But when guards checked on him in person, they reported a strange odor, burnt metal and damp earth like the scent of old tunnels long buried beneath the prison. One rookie claimed to see movement in the far corner of the cell, something dark and pulsing just out of sight. He quit the next morning and refused to speak about what he saw. The final piece of evidence came from one of the backup surveillance servers, a damaged hard drive recovered from a locked archive room. Malrick personally reviewed its footage. The contents had been partially corrupted, but one clip remained intact. It showed a narrow corridor on the lower levels, rarely used except for storage. The timestamp was 2:43 a.m., the night after the fire. Kohberger appeared in the frame walking slowly, yet his feet never touched the ground. His body floated just inches above the floor, moving steadily forward. His face was blank, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. Behind him trailed a figure, no features, no color. A shifting black mass that dragged shadows along the walls. Its form bent the light around it, distorting the air like heat rising from asphalt. As Kohberger passed the camera, the entity paused, as if acknowledging the lens. The screen flickered. Then the footage ended in silence. To the public, Kohberger remains a prisoner, serving life in solitary confinement. Blackrock's official statements continue to report him as stable and contained, but within the prison, no one enters his cell alone. Meals are left untouched. He doesn't respond to roll call. Some believe he's no longer inside at all. Others whisper that he is still there. But what returned after the fire isn't fully human. And whatever followed him back from the tunnels beneath Blackrock hasn't finished choosing its next name.